Hello everyone, Andy here, and welcome to How to Play Warmachine Part 2, the basics. I was going to call it Warmachine Bootcamp and do the whole thing in like the style of a drill instructor teaching his class, but I figured then I would have to include trenchers, and they don't have their army out yet, so #sadface. But they have been announced between my writing this script and recording this video, so #happyface. In case you don't know, Warmachine is a mass battle game set in the role-playing world of the Iron Kingdoms, where gods and demons are real, magic is a fact of life, and mechanical automata known as Warjacks stride alongside both World War I trench infantry and medieval knights in a fantastical, steam-powered Magitech full metal fantasy world. The game itself can be expected to take 45 minutes for a minimum size game or 2 hours for a maximum size game on a 4x4 table, with your army consisting of anywhere from 15 to 40 models from one of the currently existing 6 factions. The game takes place over 7 turns and presents itself as a kinetic puzzle as you roll dice and push and pull models to score points or go for that ever-present assassination kill on the enemy's leader. Uniquely to Warmachine from most other war games, all of your rolls are done on a 2d6 system, and then you add your stat to the number rolled. This allows for a level of consistency beyond what most games allow. Rolling 1d6 is incredibly random. Rolling 2d6 is always a Chad 7 move. Bell curve from a single roll? Delightful. If you want to know more about the state of the current edition as a game, a full lore guide from start to finish, or a what to buy to get started in Mark IV, go and check out my other videos linked in the description. In this video, I will cover the basics of everything you need to know to put models on the table and play your first game of Warmachine Mark IV. Everything from installing the app, to moving a model, to rolling attack dice, to moving your focus from Warcaster to Warjack. This will be a very abstract video but provide a lot of basic, foundational information. There will then be a second video where we get stuck into some more complex and obscure rules that come up often enough that you need to know them, but not so often that you need to know them for your first games. Then finally, a third video that will be a beginner bat rep tutorial where we put all of this abstract knowledge to use. But I've changed the order of those and haven't updated my script. Whoops. I'll play through a game and explain every rule interaction as I go. As we all know, the core of wargaming tends to be pretty simple, but the depth comes in how you can apply the more niche rules, so I want to keep those separate. This video is dry. We're talking the app, reading a data card, how attacking works, and a few basic rules like focus management and what's a spell. If you have never played a wargame before, this is going to get specific enough for you. But if you're totally new to wargaming, don't worry, we're going to take this slow and keep it simple. So yes, there's like 4 solid minutes of how to move a model. Is that too basic? No. We need to remove the idea that only people who already play wargames play Warmachine, so how the heck does movement work? Also, if you know how to move a model, it's very dull to watch how to move a model, so consider liking and commenting to counteract just how many people have just turned the video off right now. And are going to skip that part of the video too, okay? Thank you. First things first, all of Warmachine's rules are free and available from the Warmachine app for Android, iPhone and Windows. You can browse cards, build lists, read rules, or play the game using it to track damage on your models as you play. Each faction also has an entry telling you some basic background fluff and a strategic guide on how to play with units from your faction starter box. The app does have a monthly subscription option. This gives you access to all the background lore, narrative scenarios and league guidelines, and allows you to store as many army lists as you want, but I believe the unpaid app gives you 6 lists that you can build like that. That's pretty good. You can use the app for free without worry. A very quick guide to the app now, and by very quick I mean very long. Build a force and select Prime, and start small with a 30-point recon mission. Pick the faction you want to build a list for. Each Mark IV faction currently only has 1 army to choose from, but more will be coming soon. Press the plus to begin. If you click on the stat line of each unit, it will open up the full card for the unit, giving you stats, weapons and abilities. First thing you do is select a Warcaster to lead your army. You must also have 1 cohort model, which means a Warjack or a Warbeast. Then fill out the rest of your list with whatever other units you want, plus your 5 command cards. Now, Warcasters and War Machines are customizable. To change the Warcaster and War Machine loadouts, notice right at the top it says you're in the Add Cards section. Press back and see we now have the classic cogwheel option next to these units. When you click the cog, it will open up your available options, telling you how many spells you can take or how many points a War Machine body part will cost. The green highlighted option means they're equipped. With that list now legal, we go back to the main menu and press play, create match. Select your newly built list and there it is. Important note, what you're looking at here is a game in progress, so you could have multiples of these games open all using the same list. At the bottom, press start match. Any models that have multiple health points will have an edit symbol on the right, and any single wound models will just have a skull. If a unit dies, tap the skull, so now you know it's gone. When your War Machine takes damage and you want to note it down, click the edit button next to the appropriate Warjack. We will learn more about what all of this means later, don't worry, but when you take damage, select which column the damage is being taken to and input the amount, then press accept. With that locked in, you can leave the War Machine stat card and it keeps that damage for the next time you return. War Machine stats tend to use a lot of symbols instead of keywords, but when you want to know what a symbol means, on the data card, in the bottom left hand corner you see a question mark. Press that, go to what you're interested in, like the Warcaster's weapon, press the question mark there, boom, you get to see everything. That tip right there alone, like 90% of players don't know. You are now better than them, congrats. This game with your damaged units etc. is going to save itself and you can return to it from the play menu anytime you want. While we're in the app, it is of course the library that you want to check out a book from to find out all of the core rules, or the cards menu if you're just nosing around to see who does what. And now let's look at a data card so we have a bit of reference to all of the mechanics we're about to cover for the rest of this video. I'm going to cover the data cards because they're always so awkward to discuss, right? You need to know how to read them, but at this point you also don't know why you need to know any of these numbers. Information without context is very frustrating, but that's the eternal conflict of wargaming. Data card reading has to come before anything else, but I would also oddly recommend that you skip this next section and come back to it after you've watched the rest. You're cool, everyone learns differently, the power is in your hands. To the stat line. We're going to look at a Warcaster because they have all the stats. Some models won't have all of these because they don't need them. If your model doesn't have a ranged weapon, they won't have a ranged stat. If your model can't use spells, they won't have an arcane stat. Warcasters have all the stats. And I'll be looking at one of my favourite factions, House Dusk and the Ghost of Ios Cadre. Moraine, the Blade of Twilight. Right at the top, we have the model's picture and name. Then a bunch of words that can generally be ignored thanks to how the app presents information to us. But this is their faction and army and unit type. We then have field allowance. This is how many of the model can be taken in a battle. C means character, and so only one can be taken. Big scary monsters will tend to have FA 2, and little troops might have an FA as high as 6, but that's the max so far in the game. Then comes health. This is of course how much damage the model can take before it is removed from play. Warcasters tend to have very high health, in this case 18. A tough, normal model will have 8, a medium model tends to have 5, and most troops have a single health. War Machines range between 20 and 30, on average. Then we have the name again, but before we get to our numbers, we have symbols. The first symbol is always the base size. Moraine is on a 50mm base. We then have a series of symbols that define our model's advantages. In this case, Moraine has Unstoppable, Tough, Pathfinder, and Mounted. If you're new to the game, you 100% need a little reference card that lists all of the advantages available, honestly. In the app, click the little question mark at the bottom left, then the question mark on the unit you're interested in, and it gives you a reference for what everything there does. SPD is speed, that's how far your model moves. AAT, MAT, and RAT are arcane attack, melee attack, and ranged attack, respectively. The number is how much you add to your attack dice roll to hit the enemy. Def is your defense, symbolizing how hard you are to hit. Your opponent needs to roll equal to or higher with their hit roll to hit you. Arm is armor. So once you've been hit, every damage over this number is 1 health lost. The next 2 stats are Warcaster specific. Regular models don't get these. Arc is arcane. This is how much focus your Warcaster can generate at the start of your turn, and then is used to power up your Warjacks and cast spells. Finally, we have CTRL or control. Think of this as your power aura. Your control range is the distance you can freely distribute your focus within. It will also often be used as the range of your spells. Don't worry, all of these mechanics will get explained soon in this video. As mentioned, the lack of context, numbers are like always awkward, but we're going to get there, don't worry. I promise you, if you made it this far, then by the end of the video, you will know how to play Warmachine. Below the numbers, we have special rules. Moraine has 3, Funeral Rites, Prowl, and Reposition. On the app, tap the line to open them up so you can read. Then we get to weapons. Range comes first, then melee. Moraine's hand cannon starts with the name and ranged weapon symbol. Then on the right, we have weapon qualities, in this case pistol and damage type magical. Rat is ranged attack, range is range, not random number generator. ROF is rate of fire. If it's a 1, then no matter what, you can only shoot this weapon once per turn. AoE is area of effect, in this case not relevant. And POW is power. How does all this work? We'll cover it in how attacks work, don't worry. It's coming soon. Melee weapons are basically the same, but instead of rat, we have mat, melee instead of ranged, simple. And weapons can have their own special abilities, same as the unit, tap to see what they are, and now more Warcaster specific things. We have feat and then spell rack. The feat is a big thing in Warmachine. Every Warcaster has a unique feat, and it's generally something very powerful. Often it can define how you build your list and how your list performs. Taking the same list but swapping the Warcaster can totally change what your list does. As with all special rules, the feat tells you how it works, as they are all unique. The spell rack is a way of customizing your character. Warcasters can take a certain number of spells, typically 2 or 3, sometimes 4. These can be swapped out for other spells you have access to. Generally, each faction has a list of spells shared among all of their Warcasters, but then additionally to that generic pool of spells, each Warcaster will have access to a few unique spells. The stat line is what you'd expect. The AAT is arcane attack. The cost is how much focus it costs to cast that spell. The range is either a number of inches, yourself, or your control range. Duration is either up for upkeep, which we'll discuss later. R&D for round or not relevant, because the spell is simply an event that occurs. Off is telling you if it's an offensive spell and so needs to be cast on an enemy or not. Now I know you're going to ask the question, can you print off these data cards for ease of use? No. Okay, data card numbers red. If you stuck with me for that, don't worry, we will make all of that make sense now. If you skipped it, make sure to come back at the end to have it explained. Let's get to the table and learn movement and dice rolling and focus. Quick bit of context. This is not a game with a movement phase and then an attack phase. This is an action-based game done model by model. Every model can make a move and then an action in that order. So if you choose to shoot before moving, you are passing on your move action. If you are in melee and immediately fight, you won't be able to move afterwards. Move action, then fight action. There are 5 basic actions which are advance, aim, run, charge, attack. Advance and aim are basic actions that allow you to take a second action afterwards, while run counts as a double action and ends your activation. Advance is moving your movement speed. Aim means no movement, but you get a bonus on your ranged attack. And charge gives you extra movement speed, but unlike a run, doesn't end your activation and lets you make an attack afterwards. Movement first. This Ghost of Ios Warcaster, Moraine, has a speed of 9, and so we advance them their speed. Measure from the front of your base to the front of your base when you move. You can use a tape measure or specific fantasy widgets, whatever you prefer. You can move under your movement speed, but you can't move over it. Moving half your speed, totally fine. Moving 0.01 millimeters over your speed, absolutely not. How dare you, my good sir. A pro gamer move, getting a bit advanced here if I'm honest, is to measure from the back of your base to the back of your base, but do whatever you feel comfortable with. The important thing is to measure from the same point both times. You don't get to measure from the front of your base to the back of your base, as this would add the entirety of your base to the move. Doesn't look like a big deal with a 30mm base, but here's a 120mm colossal base moving 1 inch legally. Okay, easy. And here's the same model moving with incorrect base jumping movement. Big, and I do mean big, oof. Now let's move these Mage Hunter Assassins. These are a unit. Unit movement works slightly differently. You pick one model, and it can be a different model every time you move. Move them as previously explained. Now for the other two models in the units, there's no need to measure them. In fact, do not measure them. They all move as a unit, and you simply place them within 2 inches of the first model moved. In the game, you might want to move faster, which means run. If you do, that's simply moving your speed plus 5 inches. After a run action, you can't make a second action, so your activation immediately ends after you run. You also move further when you charge, but it's only plus 3 inches to your speed. If your charge is over 3 inches, then when you fight, you'll get a boosted damage roll. What's a boosted damage roll? I'll explain that right at the end of the video. Not yet. Note that in Warmachine, you don't need to charge to move within engagement range. You can just walk into melee. You also need the target to be in your line of sight when you declare your charge, and you have to charge in a straight line. Terrain will often come up, and one of the most common types of terrain, a forest and lake for example, both count as rough terrain, which is as soon as your base touches the terrain feature, minus 2 inch from your move. That's honestly 90% of all movement in Warmachine covered. Okay, let's talk about attacks. But not rolling dice, no. No. Before we roll, we have to know, can we roll? And that means line of sight. The very basics that will work almost all of the time is, can any part of your base see any part of their base? If yes, even if just a teeny tiny slither, then you can attack them. Simple. But to now overcomplicate things, every base size has its own volume, so the models can be sticking out over the base and in all sorts of cool custom poses. But a 30mm base will still always take up the same amount of space as every other 30mm base. It creates a cylinder, the diameter of the base, and going up 1 3/4 inches. The volume sizes are shown in the rulebook under line of sight and targeting. We don't need to memorize them, don't worry about it. This is going to come up most often with larger or same size base models blocking same size or smaller models. A very common tactic, for example, is hiding your Warcaster behind your Warjacks. A target that is entirely behind a same size or larger base obviously can't be seen. Elevation, if you're on a hill or a building, will change this though. When elevated, same sized bases don't block line of sight, and even with larger models, you need to be within 1 inch of that larger base. There's a bit more to it and different types of terrain, but for the basics and most cases, this is going to do just fine. You now understand line of sight. Okay, let's learn how to roll dice. Inevitably the most important thing to know in 99% of war games. Warmachine is the only mainstream game that uses a 2d6 system. That means all of your rolls will be rolling 2 6-sided dice at the same time. You add those together and add that number to the stat you're rolling for, and that will give you your number that needs to beat the enemy number. It's a very cool system, but will really make you question whether or not you are any good at the most basic of maths. 3 plus 4 plus 7 equals... how many more than 13? I don't know, go, figure it out. Figure it out while your opponent is looking at you like you're that special kind of slow, you know? It really gets to me if I'm honest. Anyway, in Warmachine, an attack can be ranged, melee or arcane. These are intuitive, as whichever weapon you're using will give you the number to roll against right there in its own line. Yes, your model has a mat and a rat, that's melee attack and ranged attack, but also on the weapon itself, it will have the mat or rat you need to use. We always roll our 2d6, add our relevant number, and see if it beats the enemy's numbers. The hit roll compares to the enemy's defense, and the attack roll compares to the enemy's armor. Some models will be hard to hit, but easy to damage if you do. Others will be very easy to hit, but have really thick armor protecting them. I want to point out here that all of these attacks use the same process. So first is the hit roll. Use the ranged, melee or arcane attack stat. Roll 2d6, add the numbers together and compare it to the target's defense. Then the attack roll is your power plus 2d6 against their armor. That's always it, with ranged, melee or arcane, simply allowing the stats to reflect the expertise with the model's chosen weapon. Let's do a ranged attack first. We need to hit the enemy, so we're going to use Moraine's hand cannon, and she's going to shoot Warjacks. She is Rat 6, range 12, rate of fire 1. Range is measured from the closest part of your base to the closest part of the enemy's base, which means center to center or closest part of base to closest part of base. Easy. Rate of fire is how many times you can fire this weapon in a turn. 1 is pretty much the default, but some will be 2 or D3. AoE we'll discuss in a moment, don't worry. POW 12, which is for damage. Right, let's do it. Rat 6 plus 2d6 and we roll 9. Add the two numbers together and we have a hit roll of 15. If that number equals or is greater than the enemy's def, then it's a successful hit. Our target Warjacks is def 15, so we hit. We then make our attack roll, which is 2d6 plus our POW of 12. So we roll 7, and that means our attack is 19. We compare that to Warjacks' armor, which is 15. With armor, for every point over the armor, we deal 1 damage. We rolled a 19, that means we deal 4 damage. Thematically, the reason our hit roll needs to be equal, but our attack roll needs to be greater than the armor, is that if you hit, then you hit, right? Like, you hit center mass, it worked. But for the armor, you have to break through it. It makes sense. Knowing how to deal damage is of course very important in Warmachine, but quite often the point of an attack will be to do a thing. Lower the enemy's armor before your weaker troops open fire. Move the enemy model to open up line of sight to models behind it. This sort of thing. So you need to make sure you remember your special rules and symbols and apply them when necessary. The damage is important, but the effect will often be more important. If you ever roll 2 of the same number in your successful roll, then it's a critical hit. This doesn't inherently do anything, but some abilities trigger off of a critical. A melee attack is exactly the same as a ranged attack, except you will have a much shorter range, which will be your engagement range. This is normally 1 inch, but it can be 2 inch, sometimes even 3 for some rare models. It will say so on your weapon profile. Likewise, some spells are offensive and they work exactly the same way, except you'll use the arcane attack stat on the spell line. How do you keep track of all these different symbols? Good question, because yes, they're all in the app. The question mark makes it easily accessible enough, okay? They're also in the rulebook. However, I recommend using your own custom data cards, if I'm honest, or like a quick reference sheet. Very useful to have physical media as a new player. I've released a few data cards for everyone to use for these card models. I have changed the layout to something a bit more physical, and on the back of the card I write out what each symbol means. The last thing I want to explain is the basics of your Warcaster, using their spells and how focus works, as all of these will 100% come up in your first game, as the Warcaster is mandatory in every list. For this part, to keep it basic, I'm only going to talk about Warcasters who use focus, not Warlocks who use fury. Warlocks will be discussed in the advanced video, as will all the phases of the game. For now, we start at the start. Giving out focus is one of the first things you'll do in a game. At the start of your turn, your Warcaster will fill up their focus points to their arc stat. Then all Warjacks automatically gain 1 focus if they're within the control range of your Warcaster. You then choose how many of your Warcaster's focus points you want to serve out among all of the Warjacks in your control range. The most focus any Warjack can have allocated to it at any time is 3. As you can see, handing out focus is very simple. Likewise, spending it is simple. Let's have a quick look at that. For your Warcaster, there are 6 ways to spend focus points. You can modify attacks, defend yourself, or cast a spell. Casting a spell can be done at any point in your Warcaster's activation, and it costs the number of focus listed in the spell stat line. For defense, you can spend a focus to shake an effect in your control phase, like if you're knocked down or have been blinded. In your own activation, you spend 1 focus to heal 1 damage point. And when you get attacked, you can spend 1 focus per attack to reduce the incoming damage by 5 after you know how much damage you received. When it comes to modifying attacks, you've got 2 options here. You can buy another attack with a melee weapon, or boost an attack. Note that it's only melee attacks you can buy more of, however you can buy as many more of them as you have spare focus points. Then we get to boosted attacks, which were mentioned all the way back when discussing charging. This is one of the best parts of Warmachine, which is getting to add dice to your roll. Super fun. Silly as it sounds, basic as it sounds, adding dice to your roll is great. All attacks can potentially be boosted, and if you have access to focus, then you can choose to boost your attack. 1 focus can be spent to boost either the attack or the damage roll. If you have the 3 focus spare, you could potentially buy an additional attack, boost the attack roll, and then boost the damage roll. You have to declare that you're boosting the roll before you roll the dice, and you can only ever receive 1 boost dice per roll. But do note that a boosted dice is not an additional dice, which you can gain from certain abilities. Being able to manipulate your dice pool as necessary through resource usage is always a delight, so keep boosting your rolls in mind at all times. Great use of a focus point. Then we come onto the Warjacks. The final thing to keep in mind, and with this nugget of knowledge you have completed your basic training and be ready and able to play your first game, Warjacks have focus and so can buy additional attacks and boost their attacks and can shake effects, all as discussed. However, Warjacks are slow and lumbering automata, and so if you want to run or charge for your movement, you need to spend a focus point. However, to gain or spend focus, you need to have an active cortex, which brings us to damaging a Warjack. Attacking and damaging a Warjack works in exactly the same way as any other model, except when you roll your damage dice after boosting, after any additional dice, also roll 1 different coloured dice. This dice tells us where all of that damage goes on the damage grid. Let's have a look. So, the Vipex attacked with its PAL 17 impalers and rolled a perfect 18 with its boosted attack, which cost it 1 focus to do. The Kador character Warjack, Medvedista, has an armor of 20. That means we deal 15 damage to column 4. As we're in the play mode for the app, we can use it to track our damage and do this for us auto-magically. Select column 4 and then tap the plus or slide the slider until you've dealt 15 damage. Lock that damage in. Notice that the letter C is now red, and the letter R, despite having 2 R's blocked out, still has 1 remaining and so remains functional. The letter C stands for Cortex, and with the Cortex removed, this Medvedista Warjack would no longer be able to gain or spend focus. This includes the focus it would generate itself, not just focus given to it from its Warcaster. All Warjacks have Cortex, left arm, right arm, head and movement. Some will also have front weapons, arc node and power field generator. We'll cover what exactly having a system cripple does in the next video, but let's just say it's not good for you. But playing your first game doesn't matter, just do whatever. And with that all said and done, you have enough foundational knowledge to play your first game and start to learn how all of the mechanics work together. For your first game, I'd recommend a 30-point game. The only objective is to kill the enemy Warcaster, but just get to rolling dice. Don't stress too much about the special abilities and the symbols, just move around, roll, see what happens. Game 2, bring in the special abilities, remember to use your Warcaster's feet and go from there. Building up the rules with each game, but the key is to not feel like you have to do everything all at once. Don't overwhelm yourself. With that said, if you have the House Dusk Ghost of Ios Cardra, I've made some printable data cards for you, which for your first games I think you'll find super useful. When you're ready, check out How to Play Warmachine Part 3, Advanced Training. If you like what you see, remember to share it with your friends or others who are Warmachine curious. Thanks for watching.